And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Jason Offutt back with us, has been a journalist since 1987, teaches journalism at Northwest Missouri State University. Prior to that, he was the managing editor for the Kansas City entertainment magazine called The X and a humor columnist for the Examiner newspapers in Jackson County, Missouri. He's got a Master's of Arts degree in communication from Central Missouri State University in Warrensburg. And Jason, welcome back. Your latest book, I hear, is called The Girl in the Corn. That sounds scary.
Well, yeah, it just won an award. It won the Benjamin Franklin Gold Award from the Independent Book Publishers Association, and was one of the finalists for the Silver Falcon Award from the Killer Nashville book award contest.
Good for you.
I'm pretty happy with it.
Is there a possible movie here?
You know what? I got my fingers crossed, but I've had some dealings with folks out in Hollywood before, and if there is, this sort of thing takes a long time.
And you have another novel out called How to Build a Time Machine.
Right. Yeah, I like humor, and I try to keep it out of my horror, for obviously, but I really cut loose with How to Build a Time Machine. It's a humorous sci-fi, and it got a lot of great reviews.
Good for you. How have you been lately, Jace?
Man, George, I've been great. The weather in Northwest Missouri's finally started turning cold, so I'm happy.
It's coming this way. I'm in St. Louis right now, and we're going to get it pretty soon.
Yeah, it's coming.
How did you get involved in paranormal writing?
Well, I had always wanted to write. It's one of those dreams as a little kid that I told my parents I wanted to write books when I grew up, and they patted the top of my head and then sent me along to play. But I've been interested in monsters ever since the early 70s. I've always been a voracious reader, even when I was pretty young, and I'd look at the newspaper. And back in 1973, there were stories in the Kansas City newspaper about Bigfoot sightings out in Louisiana, Missouri, and thinking, my gosh, there's monsters in my home state? That's amazing. So that got me, Momo got me fascinated in monsters.
And you wrote a book 4 years ago called Chasing American Monsters. They're all over the place, aren't they?
Right. Yes, they are. And what I tried to do with Chasing American Monsters is go state by state and show what monsters are in each state. Because yes, whether legendary or real, they're all out. They're out there everywhere.
What kind of monsters are we talking about here, Jace?
Well, we're talking everything from, of course, Bigfoot. It's the one monster that is in 49, has been encountered in 49 states. The only one it hasn't been in is Hawaii. I guess it doesn't like poi for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's been seen everywhere. I mean, everything from Bigfoot to extreme monsters like the hodag, or up in Wisconsin, or it's not ringing a bell right now. Hold on for a second and I'll get it. But it's a monster that is that cries all the time. It looks like a giant wrinkled pig, and it's just really depressed. So anything from stuff that can be real to legendary stories that are just kind of fun.
Is that the White Screamer?
No, the White Screamer is out of Tennessee. A man encountered it back in the 1800s. He and his family kept hearing screaming from outside the house, and eventually he got tired of it and got his gun one night and went looking for it. And he followed the screams throughout the forest, and eventually the screams led him back around to his house. And what was actually screaming were members of his family who were all slaughtered by something that he saw running away that was a white beast.
Clearly, people are seeing things, aren't they?
Yes, there are way too many sightings for them not to be, especially when it comes to something like Bigfoot. There are so many credible sightings. There is so much evidence out there that if this were a murder trial, somebody just from that evidence could be put away.
A couple nights ago, I was talking to Lon Strickler about flying humanoids near Chicago and winged creatures. I mean, unbelievable. Did you ever come across any of those?
Well, I only came across one winged creature. Lon's great, by the way. he has done some tremendous work through the years, and I've followed his work through through the winged creatures in Chicago, and it's fascinating. There was one winged creature that I covered, and it wasn't necessarily the person I interviewed didn't necessarily call it a creature. He called it a man. He and his family were walking home from church in the small town of Camden, Missouri, and he saw. He was about 10 years old, and he saw up in a tree a man standing there with wings, and it saw him see it, and he told his parents, I mean, look, there's a guy in the tree, and the thing just sprang into the air and flew off. They never did see it again, but there were a couple of people, he said, from his childhood who reported it in the area throughout the next couple of years.
What is some of the most unusual creatures that you have investigated or come across?
Well, there are a lot of different bizarre creatures. One of them is the demon leaper from Louisville, Kentucky. It was spotted in the late 1800s. There was an article in the New York Times about it. It was a large bat-like creature, big leathery wings, talons. Pointed ears, pointed teeth, and basically what the description was a gargoyle sitting on top of a building, and we see those in old architecture all the time. But
sure.
This one took off into the air, and it was seen specifically. I have my window open. I'm sorry, George.
That's okay.
That was a cat. It was not a cryptid.
Monster cat coming in to get you.
Exactly.
Live on the air.
If the phone goes dead, that's it, the monster cat. But, yeah, I think just the fact that we found people reported seeing a gargoyle flying through the air in Louisville, Kentucky, I think is absolutely fascinating.
I mean, what else could they be looking at to make that kind of report?
I mean, I don't know. That sort of thing it could be mistaken. I mean, I don't. There aren't any extraordinarily large, bats in the United States. Not like what's the one in Australia? The fox-faced bat. Those things are enormous. But what else? What else could it be? I mean, the wings. It could be pterodactyl wings, which those things have been seen in a number of places in the United States over the years.
Prehistoric birds. You think they could still be around?
If anything could be, I think it could be the birds. There have been a lot of discussion, from Central America to Mexico to the American Southwest, of dinosaurs, of birds especially. There was, back in 1977, a group of teachers were driving through Texas, West Texas. They were coming home from a conference, and they saw a pterodactyl in the sky. Now, these were not just teachers, but science teachers. You think 4 science teachers would know what a pterodactyl looked like, and I think they very well could. Something I think might be a little bit more realistic would be the thunderbirds from Native American lore. Thunderbirds.
Right.
Yeah, the description of those are basically the description of a teratorn, a bird that lived back in the Ice Age. Those very well still could be around.
I think that's real. There's a historical story of the Piasa bird, which is a thunderbird, in Alton, Illinois. And on the cliffs of the banks of the Mississippi, there's a huge depiction of this bird that they talk about. And they talk about how some of the Native Americans fought it because it came back with its talons and tried to pick up Native Americans and fly off with them. It was incredible. Did you ever hear of that, the Piasa bird?
I sure did, and I know exactly what painting you're talking about. I have seen it. It's fascinating because those type of birds have been seen not just in ancient times, but in the last 150 years. There was a story, I think it might have been out of Pennsylvania, back in the early 1900s, where a 12-year-old child was picked up by a bird of large size, and if it wasn't for the fact that his parents came out screaming and throwing things at it, it would have whisked him away.
Truly remarkable. Jason Offutt with us. We're talking about his works, and Chasing American Monsters is a book he wrote 4 years ago. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. You got to tell me about this title, The Girl in the Corn. That sounds like a horror book.
Well, yeah, it definitely is a horror book. I've investigated and I've just done a lot of fun research, reading for fun on all sorts of paranormal and mythological beings. And one that has always fascinated me is the little people, the Fae, because these things are all over the world. You know, when you think of fairies, you think of European lore, and specifically, Irish leprechauns.
Mm-hmm.
But elves and kobolds, trolls, the Tomtar from Sweden, the Norse mythology had their little people. All throughout Asia, South America, there are lots of stories of magical little people throughout North America. Whenever a similar tale is told world round that has been there's before the time when supposedly our cultures were talking to each other, there's got to be some truth to it, I think. And I was with my daughter when she was a little younger. She was watching the Disney Channel, and a fairy movie was on. And I was like, fairies aren't like that. They're not like that Disney, they're not like the Disney fairy at all. So that was the germ of The Girl in the Corn. I grew up on a farm, so I based it on a farm. But it's about a boy who sees a fairy in the corn, in the garden, and it terrorizes him his whole life. That's where it came from.
I was first introduced to leprechauns with a Disney movie called Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
That's with Sean Connery, if I don't
way back.
I'm mistaken.
Yep.
Yes.
It was a classic, and I've been fascinated with the story of leprechauns and stuff. Got a little disappointed when they came out with a movie of that leprechaun being evil.
Well,
remember that one?
A bit cheesy, yes. I believe that was Jennifer Aniston's first movie role. Yeah. Well, one of the things about the little people that really it made me happy when this was discovered was back in the early 2000s or maybe the mid 2000s. On the island of Flores, the locals down around Indonesia, the locals had talked about the Ibu Gogo. That was part of their local folklore. It was their little people who would come and steal food and sometimes steal babies to eat from the tribesmen.
Oh, jeez.
And they had this story, and of course Western science, completely disregarded it as mythology until scientists found in a cave system that the locals told them is where these Ibu Gogo were. They found up to 3 foot tall skeletons of fully grown humans, and it turned out to be a different offshoot of humanity, and it was called Homo florensis, and they were dubbed the Hobbits because they only grew to be about 3 or 4 foot tall. But that really confirmed what the locals had been talking about all that time.
Why do you think mainstream science, Jason, really doesn't dive into these stories? Because they're truly remarkable stories.
They are. A lot of mainstream science, and I have all the respect in the world for mainstream science, but a lot of it has to do with grant money. And if they start investigating, paranormal or just strange topics, they're not going to get that grant money. So they don't. They don't want to hurt their reputation. There's another example. In 1998. There was an ape that was discovered called the Billy ape, Bili, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a lot of cryptozoological sightings are there. But the locals said that it was a giant chimpanzee that howled at the moon and would kill leopards and eat them. They walked upright, but they would make beds like gorillas. And, science considered that a fanciful tale until in 1998 they discovered that these, tribesmen were 100% right. This thing existed. So, yes, why don't we listen to the local folklore? Because those stories came about for a reason.
It's a little like some pilots who refuse to report UFO sightings that they see.
Right, but I mean, I understand that. It's either, talk about the UFO that they saw or maybe lose their job.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to.
Right.
What would you say is the most ludicrous monster story you've ever heard?
Oh, there are quite a few. I think the Bolt Rock Slider from Colorado is pretty silly. This goes back to the days of gold and silver mining back in the 1840s, and it supposedly was a whale, a land-based whale with a big hook on its tail, and it would put the hook on the top of a mountain and just lay there and wait for prey to walk beneath it, and then it would unleash its hook and slide down and swallow up whoever was below it. It was probably this was probably come up with by miners who didn't wanted to scare away claim jumpers, but that one's pretty silly. But also, if you think about it, if that was real, my God, how terrifying would that be?
And there have been some terrifying stories too, haven't there?
Oh, there have been. I really think there are definitely, and I didn't just write this for fun. Although I had a lot of fun writing that book, there are a lot of creatures out there that are scary. There are dangerous creatures. The Lawton werewolf in Lawton, Oklahoma. There were a number of sightings from credible people of a werewolf over a short period of time, and considering all the Dogman sightings that we've had over the years through Michigan and the Beast of Bray Road, that combined with the Lougarou stories, which are werewolves in Louisiana, again, it's one of those tales that has got to have some truth behind it, I think.
Group of people were on a train in Colorado. We've got this on our coasttocoastam.com website in the highlight reel, Jason. And they have cell phone video of what looks like a Bigfoot out there in the hinterlands. And if it's a guy, he's out there by the mountains and things all by himself, dressed up like Bigfoot, which is kind of crazy to do because someone's going to take a shot at you.
I know all these people that come out, well, it's just a guy in a suit. I don't know who's crazy enough to dress in a Bigfoot suit. I had read when they were filming Return to the Jedi, they were using the Pacific Northwest, specifically up in Washington, as the planet Moon indoor, and they had people guarding Peter Mayhew, who dressed as Chewbacca, because they were afraid some hunter was going to shoot him for a Bigfoot.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Jason, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to toss some individual monster names at you, and you can describe for us what they are, where they may have been seen. Next hour, we'll open up the phone lines and give you an opportunity to talk with Jason Offit. Perhaps you have a story or two of a creature you've seen. But we'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM as we talk about his works, Chasing American Monsters. And welcome back to Coast, George Norrie with Jason Offit as we are talking about monsters. His book is called Chasing American Monsters. He's got a couple others out there. The one that he most recently wrote is scary. It's called The Girl in the Corn. And he has another one that says, So You Had to Build a Time Machine. Do you think time travel is possible, Jason?
Oh, absolutely it is. I mean, because physics says it is. Whether or not it's happening now, I don't know, but I've interviewed plenty of people who've had something happen to him that they can't quite explain. And there have been plenty of stories out there that are believable. So, yes, absolutely. Whether or not we can go backward in time or not, that's the big problem. Forward, heck, we're doing it right now.
If you could go back into time, where would you go?
Oh, my gosh, not farther than the Pure Food and Drug Act being passed in the United States. Because most people, romanticize, I want to go back and, see Christ. I want to go back and see the pyramids being built.
Yep.
You couldn't eat the food. You couldn't drink the water. The air would be cleaner, but other than that, you'd be in some deep trouble.
And if you went into the future, how far out would you go?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know how much further I'd want to go, George. Given the way the world is right now, we've got two wars going on. Who knows how long the world's going to be around? That sounds too pessimistic. I'm sorry. Let's go 1,000 years.
I think in the long run we're going to still be here, Jason. We're going to make it work.
George, I hope so. I really do.
Me too. Let me throw some monster names at you and give us some descriptions of these things. The Ililama Lake Monster, if I'm saying that right.
Right, and there are a couple of names here. I'm not sure if I'm saying right, but I think that's pretty close. This is a monster from Alaska that the native people have had stories about for centuries. It is an enormous fish, about 30 feet long.
Wow.
And one of the things, it's got it's silver, and it has a block-sized head or a block-shaped head, and it uses that block to sink boats. So it was a warning not to get out on the lake because the monster might get you. There are other stories very similar to that try to keep people from I've tried to keep people over the years from going out someplace dangerous. That might be another one, but there have been modern sightings, modern as in at least the 1940s.
Now you mentioned one that had a similar name to this, but this is called the Garo.
Right, that's from Arkansas in the late 1800s. And one of the things about the late 1800s, the newspaper industry was an absolute mess. Actually, through a lot of the later 1800s, they were extremely sensationalist and printed a lot of things that were dubious. I'm just qualifying that.
Yeah, we called it yellow journalism.
Absolutely. I just got finished lecturing on yellow journalism to my intro class. But this was in Arkansas. This was reported in the Arkansas Gazette. There was a monster that was reported killing livestock and killing local pets. And they called it the Goro because that's the noise allegedly that it made. And people finally got sick of this thing. It would leave tracks in the ground leading from bodies of water to the farms, and they tracked it down. They shot it. It was a big fight. It ended up ripping down trees. Bit the leg off of one of the members of the posse that was out hunting it.
Oh my gosh!
But they put it down. It had web feet. It was about 20 feet long. It was a lizard. It had a couple of tusks, rows of horns along its back, and a long, thin tail with a blade on the end of it. And they didn't keep it. This is one of those stories. There are so many of these that they sent it to the Smithsonian, and it disappeared.
Poof. Interesting. What about the Dark Watchers? What are they?
All right, the Dark Watchers. I like this. This is a California story, and apparently in the mountains around near Los Angeles, you can see people standing on a ledge, looking out toward the ocean, and they appear as silhouettes. And people have seen them throughout the years. They have they've left no real no tracks, nothing to say that they're real. And if you show up nowadays, the legend is, and you're not wearing any sort of clothing that is from similar to the 1800s, that they will immediately vanish. But if you wear old wool clothing, you can get fairly close to them before they vanish. But John Steinbeck wrote about these. They were in a poem. They've been mentioned in a song. I don't remember which artist did the song, however, but they're fairly famous, and they haven't ever hurt anybody apparently.
The Wog.
The Wog. There may be well, I'll get to that in a second. What the Wog is, it's in Georgia. It's Jackson County, Georgia specifically. It's considered a black demon dog. It has its front legs are it's about the size of a small horse. Its front legs are longer than its rear legs. It sounds to me from the description to be very similar to a hyena. And
Hmm.
there have been hyena sightings across the United States over the years. There was back in the Pleistocene era. There were two species of Pleistocene hyena that lived in North America, and I think some Pleistocene animals very well could still be around. Like we were talking, the thunderbird, the teratorn, it could still be here in some distant place, and anything um, described as a hyena, I think might still be around. There was one shot in Wyoming uh, back in the early 1900s, and it's stuffed and in a museum, and the owner won't let anybody do any DNA testing on it, which is unfortunate. But I think the wog may be one of those.
How about the Enfield monster?
This is a fairly famous case in Enfield, Illinois. There was a scratching at a door back in the early 1970s. I think it was 1973.
That's never a good sign.
Never a good sign. I'm not answering the door if they're scratching at the door, and
No.
I don't have a dog. In 1973, a guy named Henry McDaniel looked out his window and saw a hulking object. He thought it might have been a bear, but there, weren't any bears in the area that he knew of. But he grabbed a flashlight and a gun and went outside, and he saw a creature that was trying to hide between a couple of his rose bushes. It was humanoid, vaguely humanoid shaped. It was grayish. It was about 4.5 feet tall. It had 3 legs, and he shot it. And when he shot it, it screamed and jumped away like a kangaroo. The footprints that it did leave footprints. After he called the police came and found him, and they were vaguely dog shaped, but they had six toes. And it was reported another, a couple of times in that area, but then eventually disappeared forever.
Now, what in the world is the Meschenbeck?
I didn't bring my book down with me in that one. I don't actually remember. That's embarrassing.
What a bizarre name.
It is a bizarre name. Well, a lot of these have bizarre names. We've got the Grunch, the Boo Hag, the Awful. Those are all bizarre but equally great names.
What is the Grunch?
The Grunch is there are a lot of stories around the country. I know there's one in Massachusetts, there's one in Illinois, and this one's from Louisiana. The Grunch, and they're vaguely similar. The Grunch live along a road, an abandoned road, and out in the forest, and they're supposedly small deformed people. The legend is the same as it is in these other states, that there was a mental institution out in the country, and it shut down, and a number of patients disappeared and eventually formed their own colony, and all the people are inbred and deformed, and the Grunch are these people in Louisiana around New Orleans, and if you are on this country lane, which high school kids like to go out there and park, the Grunch, if you go outside, the Grunch might steal you.
I love that. How about the Beast of Truro?
The Beast of Truro is an enormous turtle that lives in a lake. It's about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, is what it's been described as.
It's a big turtle.
And it's a huge turtle, and a snapping one at that. And if it's the pond that it supposedly lives in has been it's changed hands because people have bought and sold the land. But in modern days, somebody occasionally will report it, but they've never drained the pond to actually find it.
We are talking with Jason Offutt. We're going to take calls with him next hour. Nain Rouge, what is that?
This is from Detroit, from way back when the French were in control.
My old hometown.
Of that area. And this is a little red demon, and it was said to have been seen when the French and the Native Americans from the area had a war. and the war was so bloody that the ground was red, and that the nearby river flowed red. And the Nain Rouge, this little red demon, was seen dancing and chortling on the battlefield, and it has been seen in Detroit over the years when some disaster happens. There was a huge ice storm in the 1970s, and it was seen by a electric worker as he was on a fire pole, or not a fire pole, but on a light pole, trying to restore the lights after the ice storm, and he saw the Nain Rouge on another light pole down the line, laughing. And it has been witnessed at other times in Detroit. But I think that is a fun story, because there are all sorts of paranormal creatures that either precede or follow disasters. And of course, I think the most famous one in the United States, it has to be Mothman.
Oh, there's no question. But he brought danger, did he not?
Mothman?
Yeah.
He definitely brought a lot of strange things along with it. Not just the Silver Bridge collapse, but there were, I believe, missing pets, and then of course we have all of the Men in Black encounters that John Keel wrote about.
What are space penguins, Jason?
Yeah, this happened in Missouri, and down around Jefferson City back in the 1960s. And a farmer on Valentine's Day he just went outside to look at a fence that had been giving him problems, and he saw what looked like a mushroom, a giant mushroom, in his field. And he walked closer to it, and as he walked closer to it, he saw some figures about 3 to 4 feet tall, standing outside of the mushroom, and they were green, and they looked like penguins.
Jeez.
And he did, I guess, what guys normally do. He didn't go up and say, "Hi, may I take you to my leader?" No, he started throwing rocks at them. And the rocks hit what, sounds like the shields, the force shields from the Starship Enterprise, and they just bounced off of a spot in the air. And at that point, when they saw they were under attack, they got back in. They got into the into the giant mushroom, and it went up and
off it went
to the sky.
Night people.
I mean, we're not pleasant people, George. We'll throw rocks at aliens.
We'll do worse too. Now, what are the night people?
The night people is a story from my hometown of Orick, Missouri. This was in the early 1960s. A man named Vern Windsor, when he was young, he didn't like to go to bed, like a lot of kids don't like to go to bed. But, he went when his parents told him to, and he said he would stare out the window, and he would see what he called the night people. And they were doing what people normally do during the day. They were talking to each other over the fence. They were mowing the yard. They were, pushing a baby stroller down the sidewalk. He couldn't ever hear anything, though. He could just see them. And the odd thing about them was that they had big eyes like fish. They had fish eyes. And they absolutely fascinated him, and he would watch them whenever they'd come out. He called them the night people because they would go in and out of houses and do everything the day people would do, which were, his family and all the neighbors. And one night, they noticed he saw a little boy outside with a ball, and he wanted to go outside and play with this little fish-eyed boy. And the father of the boy, that's what he assumed, saw him, and he saw that they were seen, and Vern passed out. And
it scared him.
It was, yes, or he was made to pass out. He, woke up the next morning, and he was on the floor, and he was, still in his pajamas, but he was on the floor. Later in life, he thinks that these might have been extraterrestrials. They might have been aliens, because he had a pain in his nose, and he blew it, and out came a silver object,
like a little implant.
Exactly. He said it looked like the size of a Tylenol capsule, and he was going to save it. He took it to the bathroom to wash the blood and mucus off, and it melted and went down the sink. Like it was mercury.
What a discovery that would have been. Jace, we're going to take a short break, come back and take phone calls. A couple more monsters I want to ask you about, including the Lizard Man.